This is Basket Case Clubs, CPR Group's podcast where we turn basket case clubs into showcase clubs. Hello everyone and welcome back to Basket Case Clubs. I'm Michael Connolly and as usual it is my pleasure to take you on this journey of basket casey goodness. Joining me as usual, as mostly, and sometimes other people join you. Anyway, this is Steve.
The passenger on the journey of basket casey goodness. Thanks for having me. Does that make you the pilot or
Driver. I'm happy with both. Could I be commander, captain, admiral?
This is going to go south really fast.
What do you mean, gunner?
Yeah. Once again, we start south.
We start on our Segway. Dad had a Segway. Isn't that a funny Segway?
You did have a Segway.
Yes.
I crashed the Segway.
You did crash.
For those of you
Segway.
who don't know what we're talking about, a Segway is a two-wheeled, side-by-side wheeled mobility device that runs
Kind of like a hoverboard with handles?
Yeah, not that the handle helped me very much. Anyway, I've really pushed it to its limits, and it has limits.
Because didn't they have a key, like unlike the lime scooter,
Three
you just jump
speeds.
on? Yeah. Or they regulate based on geo-positioning where they are, so it will throttle back.
Right.
This year
okay.
you had to have a different key to
You
be
did.
the 40 kilometres an hour speed or something.
Oh, and it wasn't that fast. I think it felt that fast when I came crashing off it. Yeah, I'd like to say that e-mobility devices have become a lot safer since then, but I'd probably...
And putting the two wheels that way rather than that way probably makes sense. There was that thing that you leant on and to steer, but that one had a throttle, didn't it? So it wasn't the leaning speedy.
No, it was the leaning to speed. It didn't have its turning was different instead of leaning. You turn the handlebars instead of leaning. This is a
segue.
A
segue about segways.
Yeah.
How about that, hey?
But I survived, and
Obviously.
of course I was wearing a helmet. Yes, and
But you
lived
took all
to
the
tell
bark
tale.
off your back.
Took
didn't
all
you?
the bark off my back. Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, what a segue. So
What are we supposed to be talking about this evening?
I'm just trying to think of a segue from the segue back to like an anti-segue. That would be
Don't fall off
your club. All right. Okay, that'll do. It's a bit weak. We'll see if we can tidy that up in post-production. Get some auto-tune.
I need to admit that I was going to say don't fall off the wagon, but we've been down that path in previous episodes, and it made me sound like I have a problem, which I don't.
Hey, first step. Acknowledging there is a problem.
I can so see that coming.
Yeah, well, you set them up, I knock them down. So today I want to continue where we began this little mini-series about the challenges that volunteers are facing in community sport and dig into the pressure a little bit. But I want to talk specifically about how clubs grow. Now, often the growth that a club experiences, you just said passenger. Often the leaders in clubs are passengers to growth. So it just happens without guidance and it happens without design. So it's almost growth by default. Remember Homer Simpson? Default, two greatest words.
It's funny you say that.
What, that bit about
the
Homer?
growth button? Yeah, that's hilarious. Simpsons references are always welcome around here. But the notion of what did you say about growth? That growth, just happening to you
By default.
By default,
rather than by design.
And you and I often tell stories about how we've challenged clubs in the past when setting growth targets. When they say things to us like, "Hey, come and help us with a strategic plan. We want to grow. We need a plan to help us grow and to accommodate growth effectively." And then we say, great, but how much do you want to grow? And they say, we want to go from 250 to 300 in 5 years. We say, you could probably do that by just not sucking, And it's that same.
Where do you exist?
Concept.
Like we exist in a high growth area,
Yep.
We've got,
of course, depending on your
in
location.
that 5 years, we've got 1,000 families moving into the community and we're the only provider of export here. Yeah.
Just don't suck and you'll grow.
Yeah. But is that enough? And we've got so many volunteers who feel the pressure of volunteering and the pressure of their role, particularly on committees where it's like they're handed the baby and it's like just don't drop it for a year, but don't do anything with it. So don't design growth, don't plan for growth. So,
and I think a lot of that comes from the way it's always been. The legacy that they're handed is just get by, just
Yeah.
make it through the year,
Yeah, yeah,
as we've discussed.
yeah. So I was mowing the lawn one day, and I think I may have talked about this before. I've probably talked about mowing the lawn a lot. I have a lot of
Your
lawn.
grass
to mow,
grows quickly.
Well, yes, living in southeast Queensland with a lot of rain. So we've always thought, well, what is it that we're trying to help clubs to do? And I had an epiphany at one point, and I said, we're helping clubs get to the next level. And it made perfect sense. And then I thought, hang on a minute, what level are they on, and what level do they want to be on? And they weren't really codified. So I thought the reason that this is part of this talking about the pressure that clubs are under is growth happens in the number of members we've got, for instance, and that can be as a reaction to a World Cup or an Olympic Games where a rising tide raises all ships, and there's growth. So it wasn't necessarily, we weren't planning for that growth, but we've experienced it. And we've had a growth in membership that hasn't been matched by growth in systems, or a growth in understanding of governance, or growth in the level of sophistication of the processes that we're going to now need to run this very different business than it was.
Isn't it funny how common it is outside of sport in the real world of business that this same thing happens?
Exactly the same thing happens. Yeah.
Yeah, we've not learned.
Unless you take a deliberate approach.
Yep.
So there are startups that have, I give you Meta,
Yeah.
that have moved very, very quickly because there was some deliberate, and I recognise that's probably not in 100% the best analogy, but Marky Mark had an idea for what he wanted to do with comms, although it was he Harvard?
I don't know.
Whatever
but
it was.
Yeah, one of them.
One of the
Big ones.
I was going to say lucky boy schools.
Silver
You got to
spoon in
be
the
Silver
house,
Spoon, yeah. Silver Spoon Club. Somebody said, "Oh, the Lucky Sperm Club." Just thinking, oh man. So yeah, the Silver Spoon concept, same sort of thing. Kids, ask your parents about what I mean by that. Back on track. So I think that he had a desire to improve communication and to create a social network.
Yep.
In an online environment rather than a social network, which is a great term for it because we have people that we know, and because I know somebody in my network, if you have a problem that you're talking to me about that I know that one of my mates can help you solve, a painter for instance, you're looking for a painter and I know that I've had this, but you've got no way of connecting with him apart from through me. So social networking has always worked, but just took it online. But I think that Marky had an idea of how to grow the business deliberately. And so, and now look at what it's become. We were complaining yesterday about how the algorithm wants you to keep spending money. So if you don't spend any money, you can participate. You can be the commodity that gets sold to. If you do start spending money, then it makes you spend more. But that was deliberate. It wasn't accidental. So the growth that has been experienced in companies like that has been deliberate and by design. Clubs don't do that because there are these reluctant volunteers left holding the baby and they just try and get by, then give it to somebody else at the end of their term next year with their hand reluctantly thrown in the air at the AGM to be treasurer or president.
Yeah, and not only are clubs typically not taking action to achieve significant growth, to take a leaf out of Meta's book, they're also, in the vast majority of cases, not building systems that can accommodate that growth, which is why we experience clubs that feel real growing pains and members who have gone from, this really nice community, and I'm sure that you're going to talk about this in your progression through the levels, but then that club grows exponentially or at least significantly and it stops feeling like that really tight-knit community, and I feel like a number, and I'm receiving a very different type of service from that club. So, and that's not always a bad thing, to be clear, in my opinion. I think that there are some necessary changes in the way that a club will deliver its services as it grows. But we again, I think that maybe what you want to talk about is taking a deliberate approach to that, rather than it, just being the case that we're changing now how we deliver our services to you. and then retrospectively saying, oh yeah, we meant that, rather than when members say, hey, this is a bit shit now. It used to feel like my second family, whereas it doesn't for this reason or that reason anymore.
And usually that happens accidentally.
Yeah.
What I want this episode to deal with is to say, this is coming. Be aware of what these levels are. And to be honest, there's limited science in this, apart from trawling through thousands of clients. So science, you know, testing it and then being able to run a hypothesis, but it is yet to be falsified. So we've been
Fact.
teaching this.
It's clearly fact, then.
Well, now that it's going to be published, it's going to be fact. And we have talked about this before, but I want to... So as you progress through the levels, it's actually really important that you understand that what's coming is different from what's been. It's different from what's here and it's different from what's been. And the challenge is when we've got really big clubs still running on the same systems as really small clubs, because they didn't realise that we have to adapt. As growth happens to us, when it's by default, not by design, we actually have to get active in becoming the right sort of committee or the right sort of structure to make this club work, rather than just let it be broken the whole time.
And we've touched so far on the members and their receipt of services, but I think it's really important also to consider then the impact that has, that rapid transition from, you know, small to big and still operating with small club systems, is the significant impact that it has on the volunteers, the doers, the workers.
And that's the point, yes.
Yeah.
So and so we've got volunteers who are in a position of being expected to be able to run this club without being enlightened about how it's going to be different, or given the tools to be able to do it differently.
Okay.
So there's 4 levels: level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, but I'm actually lying because there's a level 0. So we're going to start with a level 0, and these are the absolute startups. So these are the very, very small clubs that have just begun, or they're still in the same situation that they were when they had just begun. So they're little. They're typically categorised by having 20 or fewer members, thereabouts. So 20 is an about 20.
For those who are just listening to this episode, Michael just did a little spirit fingers with his hands to demonstrate the about 20.
Thank you.
Which works wonderfully for our video viewers. About.
Okay. Well, thank you for the
Hey, I'm
explanation.
just
I
here
did think
to...
just here to help or interrupt. Thank you. Pardon me for interrupting your interruption. So we've got these clubs that have about 20 members, and they can be startups and grow through that phase deliberately. And we've certainly seen that. And even clubs like a community garden, for instance, that might be a very small group of, well, what do we need? 7 to incorporate, or thereabouts, 5, 6, 7, depending on the state. So we have a small group, and then they become incorporated, and they deliberately try and grow membership because they realise that, just like a social networking platform, the more people that are involved, the better this is for everyone. So they try and grow, and they do it deliberately. Good. But we've also got clubs that are very old. So the poster child for me here are the senior cricket clubs that play in one of the not the Premier League cricket, because that's typically more structured with a high level of professionalism, because you need it, because you know, we're playing for sheep stations when you're playing in Premier cricket.
And you need a base of the pyramid to support your peak at the top. If you're playing at that level in one of your teams or several of your teams, then you need a larger club that's going to be on our later levels.
Yeah.
Okay.
But these are the more social cricket clubs. But they're a club, they need to have their legal status, they need to have somewhere to train, they need to have somewhere to play, and they need to provide home grounds. So there's a lot on those clubs, but ultimately you look at it and they are sometimes lucky to have a team. At most they might have 3, but often they grow from 3. But 3 teams, that's 33 people if you can fill 3 teams. So often it's one team, because we're not quite there at 2 when we're up around that 20 mark. So there's the weekly problem of ringing around everyone on a Saturday morning trying to find 11 players who are still shit-faced or hungover from the night before, prepared to go and take the field. Plus we've got to supply our own umpire, plus it might be our turn to roll the wicket on a Wednesday. So they really struggle. And so the main challenge for these guys is they are absolutely in survival mode. And it's survival literally from week to week, because at any point, It might rain outside and we don't get a game, or it might have rained yesterday and that meant that a few of the blokes on the team had the day off and hit the pub early and got drunker than they normally would. Like, and I'm being a bit derogatory here, but these are real world problems that are really faced by these clubs. They can't, so they are, you have one family that moves away and they lose critical mass. They lose their team. So the very fabric of their existence disappears because one family moved away. Mm-hmm. So that's a really interesting struggle. And when we talk to these clubs about governance, they say, I don't care about governance because I just care about getting players on the field on the weekend. And rightly so. That is right. That is their biggest challenge. Mm. But they've also got layers of governance challenges that sit underneath that. I said they need a facility, so they need to be doing the maintenance or paying for the maintenance, which means that when you're dividing the cost of a lease plus regular maintenance plus all of the fertiliser, pesticide, herbicide, black soil that needs to go on the wicket, the cost of buying the roller, getting a grant to do that, plus then having somebody to roll the wicket, having somebody to mow the wicket, water the wicket, like we're in thousands of dollars and sometimes thousands of dollars per player, because you're dividing all of that cost base among very few customers. Mm. So it's not a sustainable business model. Yet it persists. There are still clubs that are clinging on to that for sovereignty reasons. I need to protect my trophy cabinet. I need to protect my honour board, with 6 names on it. Yeah. And what's happening is even at that entry level, we are burning out volunteers because we've got high demands on them. And rightly so, we need to have those high demands because risk management is risk management whether you've got 20 members or 2,000 members. Mm. So fair enough. Then we get to level 1. So this is kind of where we're starting to see some foundations be a bit stronger. So the level 1 is, they haven't really yet achieved critical mass, but the struggle changes. So rather than being worried about our existence this time next week, we're worried about our existence this time next year. So we're pretty sure that somewhere these clubs are in the range of more than 20, but up to about 60. So I'll do my magic fingers again.
Good, yep.
What did you call them?
Spirit fingers.
Spirit fingers, okay.
It's like the squiggly line on your keyboard, about.
Exactly, yes. I should do one of these, like a little fishy thing. So it's about 60. So that's then the top level. These guys, I call them the infants. So it's kind of seed mode now. We've had startup, and this is where we're really planting the seeds for growth. Mm-hmm. The challenges are very different. So while we're likely to be here next week, our main concern is getting people to be able to flick past all of the committee roles too. There's then the challenges of making sure that we've got enough money to pay for our audit, making sure we've got enough money to pay our annual return fee, making sure we've got enough people who actually know that even needs to happen, that we need to be submitting financials to the state government every year. So those are a different set of challenges that our infants face than our startups faced. So survival here and then seed mode here. Now we get into the really interesting one. So level 2 does represent a massive chunk of our sports club population, and it's from that about 60 to 150. But that 150 is a solid marker. Now the reason 150 is a solid marker is, as humans, evolutionarily speaking, over time we have naturally at around 150, and scientifically that number has been debated, but the concept is sound. And this goes back to the very earliest of humans. We're gregarious creatures, but we're gregarious and we want to be around those that we know. So level 2s are the villages. Because we've got this sense of a village where we all know each other and we all love each other, because we do. 150 people is kind of the maximum number of people that you can know in your head. So I know you because I know that you don't mind a whiskey, but it's probably going to be a Highland or a Speyside. You're probably not going to like an Islay, they're a bit smoky for you. You do like baked beans on toast, but your flavour in toast is probably a bit more... Well, I know this about you because you're my brother. But I also know that you have a wife, and her name is Katie, and I know that you live with a tiny little girl named Vori, and you've got Huddy and you've got Willow. So I know you and I know your family, and we've hung out under certain conditions, and I know those conditions. So for you, those conditions might be a round of golf. For somebody else, it might be a game of canasta or mahjong. But I know that that's the context that you fit in. but I know you. But that takes up 5 in my my storage device up
finite
here.
memory bank.
Yeah, and it's more than just memory. It's we
Connection.
are friends, like friends in the real sense,
Okay.
and we might be colleagues at work, but we're not just somebody who's connected with me on LinkedIn. I know stuff about you, and so that's the number of people that we can hold in our head. When you get a club that is about that size, it's fairly straightforward to run it because you know what's going to land well with your members. If you try a new event, when the committee says, "Oh, I don't think our members will go for that," they're right, because they know everyone. They know that the 149 people in their circle of members, what they like and whether that's going to work. So it's a really interesting point. It's a really interesting place to be, because that's what we know. And this is so well known that there are companies, Gore Industries, I think it's called, that makes Gore-Tex, so the stuff in your waterproof hiking boots and jackets for motorbike riding. When their business units grow to 150, they leave it there and they go and open another building.
Right.
And they then grow that one until it gets and that's no different to our tribal ancestors. When the tribe got to 150, everyone still knew each other, but when it got bigger than that, there started to be some rivalry happening. So a second alpha would start to emerge and challenge the alpha, and then they'd split, and people would say, well, I pledge my allegiance to this alpha or this alpha, and then they'd split, and then they'd both be less than 150, and then they'd grow to 150 with harmony, and then guess what? The same thing would happen.
Sounds like some sports that we work with.
Explore that. Go into dig into detail. When have you seen that?
Oh, how much detail should I share here? There is a particular sport.
The appropriate level of detail.
Yeah, thank you.
And I know exactly where you're going to go.
Yeah. Well, there is a sport that is faced with people challenges broadly. But here in Queensland, this particular sport has more breakaway clubs than original clubs affiliated with the state governing body. So if you ever needed evidence of this same pattern emerging in sport, I think that sport would be it.
Yeah.
Now, I don't...
It's really interesting that the number's pretty well right, isn't it?
It is. It is pretty well right. It's not a sport that has many clubs bigger than 150. I'm just trying to think of any, actually. So,
But it's we've seen that pattern emerge so many times with the infighting starting and then the splintering and then going to council to find another site and like the duplication and waste is what bugs me, and it's because we haven't realised, these clubs haven't realised that the challenges that we're going to face when we go above 150 are now very different. So I said level 0 to level 1 is different, level 1 to level 2 is different. Level 2 and above, so level 3 and level 4 are vastly different.
just quickly, can I jump in the resource duplication and wastage that you just touched on there? And I know that we've talked about this a lot and will continue to do so, but that's probably for me the most frustrating and certainly front of mind challenge that I see our startups recognising that we don't see a whole heap of those anymore. I think that, like you say, most of our clubs are in this 60 to 150.
We do basket case clubs and we provide webinars and we do work with councils and peak bodies specifically for our level 0 and level 1s, because we know that they're not at the point where they're ready to take on the responsibility of investing in consulting.
Nor do they have the time, because they're so bloody busy with that really small pool of human resources from which to draw that they... And I thought about this earlier when you talked about, they're not necessarily being someone who knows that the annual return needs to be done. That compliance requirement is far more likely to be met if you have a larger pool of people from which you can draw. There's a higher likelihood that one or some of those people are going to know how to run a business and how to do, good governance and how to maintain compliance of that business. All of that becomes very difficult when you've got few people to draw on. But again, I think the very real trap that clubs fall into is not recognising exactly what you just said, that things are going to be really different once we grow beyond that 150 point.
Yeah, and that's kind of the key in presenting this model in this context is know that it's going to be different.
Yep.
And prepare for
Plan
it to be
for it.
different,
Yep.
and then build the systems as you're crossing the threshold, not when you've already splintered or already had lots of fights or already stepped away and then just handing over a broken business because the model is not fit for purpose anymore because you're trying. So the villages at up to 150, that's stability mode. So we've had our startups kind of just, really, really kick off, and then seed mode, which is where we're starting to plant the seed. Now we get to stable. But that stability is like same. We hate change because we love same. Same is the devil we know. Same, I call it the warm blanket of same. I know what's coming. It might not be great, but it's good enough to get through the season. So we just wrap ourselves in that and we don't have to worry about change. We don't have to plan, we don't have to think, we just stay here. Clubs, to the point of ripping themselves apart, so splintering and creating new clubs, will go to that length. So they'll destroy growth for the benefit of staying as the village because of that feeling that you talked about at the top. We love that feeling.
Yep.
We love that stability. When we cross that threshold and go from 150 up to, and again, the numbers get a bit hazy because they don't really matter, but the number that I'm going to say is 700. 150 to 700, that's scaling mode. So this is where we're really ideally deliberately growing, but sometimes growing just because of those environmental factors with the rising tide raising all ships. But the challenges here are now we don't know everyone. So now we have to rely on the network of the people in the middle. So that's our committee, but it's also a network of coaches, managers, our officials, who then they've got their own networks within the club. So if you think about a club of 650, that's 4 lots of 150. So remember Warren Buffett saying, if you get 9 girls pregnant, you won't have a baby in a month. It's like if you just work 4 times as hard, you're not going to get the same result as you did when you had 150 just because we've got 4 times as many members. It's a different club. It's a different business at that level. So the challenges that we've now got are challenges of growth and scale. So given that this is scaling mode, so at this level, we're starting to think about tenure in a whole new light. We're starting to think about our responsibilities for some more sophisticated things. Like instead of just trying to just cast the net, the shoot from the hip type approach with marketing, we're starting to think about things like customer churn. What net growth do we want? Because we can get sophisticated. So what's the data that we've got? What can we rely on? What can we look to as leading indicators and as lagging indicators of our performance? But that only works when it's done deliberately, because what will happen if you try and run a club of 650 the same way that you ran a club of 150 is you will typically ostracize 450 people. Sorry, 600. Was I saying 650? 600. Michael should not. It was about.
Michael we had the spirit fingers.
Yeah, Michael should not do public maths. So when we get into this mode, these are the expanders. So our expanders in scaling mode are a different beast. The people who hold these clubs back don't do it deliberately, and they're trying to maintain that village feel, and that comes at the expense of not connecting. So I'll remember, I won't say the name again, but a club that had the committee, and the committee sat in a certain place in the grandstand, and then there was the others, the them. So it's us and them. The them sat over on the hill and used to pick on the committee. But like the them are thinking that the us are doing a terrible job as the committee, and the committee, the us, are thinking that them are just hurling abuse at us and trying to tear us down tall poppy syndrome-wise. Well, it's because you don't know them. Yep. It's because this club at that point was 350 something.
Okay.
Yet they still tried to be the village. And you had the people that I spoke to on the hill were a village, and the people on the committee were a village, and those 2 villages were like separate tribes with separate alphas. Sound familiar? Like, how many times have you seen that happen? And it is uncanny. So what I hope you're doing as you're listening to this is thinking, where are you at? Because every single time I've told this story since finishing the development of the model, I get these people going, oh my God, that was us.
Yeah.
That was so us, or that is us. But the important thing is, what can we do about it? So once we move from the expanders to our final bunch, which are the institutions, and now we're getting into synergy mode. So this is where, exactly as we were talking about earlier today, we've got to realise that we can't run an institution on volunteer labour alone. You're hard pressed at the bigger end of the expanders in scaling mode to do that without paid help. There will always be paid help in there, despite what anyone says to you to say we are proud of the fact we are fully volunteer run. Who does your bookkeeping? Do you pay your auditor? Do you pay the guy who mows the lawn? Do you pay the lady who brings in the fertiliser?
There'll be something.
You are. They might not be employees, but you are paying for service. Did you pay a lawyer to read over the lease that you signed with council? Yes, you did. Do you have bookkeeping services? So they are already relying on professional help, even though they might not be internal. By the time we get to an institution, they should run like an institution. Too many organisations of that size, and even some of the smaller state and national bodies are only about that big, only just into the institution size. And even some of them, and I know you've worked with some that are proper basket cases, that they're still trying to be this 150 member village when we've got 2,000 people worried about, we were talking about one this morning, worried about the support that they ain't getting from their state body, and then the national body swoops in and saves the day and ruffles feathers because it's the them and us thing again. It's a different beast.
Can I ask a question? In your opinion, what do you think is the primary reason that the administrators, the leaders of our expanding clubs, so the ones that are up to in scaling mode, so up to 700, what do you think is the primary thing that holds them back from delegating out the cascading of information or the delegation of tasks to others? You know, you mentioned that sort of middle ground being coaches, officials, managers, the people with their own networks internally. Why is it that the leaders of those clubs are still in many cases trying to connect directly with people and behave in the way that they could when it was a village? Is there... Yeah, I've got my thoughts, but I'm interested.
I was going to say, it sounds like you've got your thoughts.
Go on. I'll ask
you want me to go first?
Shut up, you go first.
Okay, so the answer is multiple things. There's not a one-size-fits-all model, because you will have, but I'll say a general lack of leadership, and it's not necessarily leadership as a skill, but it's leadership as a trained skill. So something that we've actually said, as a leader in this type of organisation, this is what people are relying on you for. It can also be a lack of an induction and training, so people just don't know what they're responsible for. It can be knowledge is power, and if I hang on to this knowledge, then I stay in the position of power.
And that association with between that power and that person's identity, as we've discussed many times previously, that idea that that power here brings me a sense of importance that I don't get at home, that I don't get at work.
And then there's good old-fashioned fear. I'm scared that if I do delegate it to somebody else, the old saying, if you want a job done right, do it yourself. Well, you're never going to grow when you're doing that. So if you want a job done right, delegate the job plus the system. Here is the way that this is done successfully. And it doesn't need to be a great big... Nobody's going to read a big 4-ring binder of stuff. People aren't even going to watch training videos anymore. But if this is the sort of thing where we've built an AI agent that I can just natural language query and say, how do I set up for game day? And because it's trained on our standard operating procedures, it's just boom, this is what you got to do. This is the order. So can you draw me a diagram of how to lay out the cones for this activity? Of course it can. So we're living in an age where we should be and I know you were talking about AI in another session today, we should be pushing those envelopes. So there's a reluctance to change, a reluctance to learn new tricks because I'm an old dog, a reluctance to relinquish power, a reluctance to look stupid because it might fail if I don't do it. And although it will be that other person that I can blame, it'll still come back to me. And again, that's all terrible leadership.
Yeah.
Leadership is not about blaming someone or being scared of making a mistake. Leadership is about saying, where are we trying to get to? being clear on that and then saying, great, now we've got an accountability stake in the ground, let's move towards it. We can always move it. But if everyone knows that's where we're going, there's no confusion. When nobody knows that's where we're going, then we have some people who think this is a club that's all about on-field performance and premiership contention. And there are other people who think this is all about kids getting onto the field young and having fun, and then growing team skills and life skills to grow as humans. When those two lots of people with significantly opposing views are both trying to run an expander or an institution, we are in serious trouble, because that is going to end up in a flare-up. So we've got to be deliberate. We've got to know that that's coming in the trend. And the point is that our volunteers don't know. So nobody's sharing this information with them. We're sharing it with them. Our colleagues in councils, in peak bodies, our partners in state associations and national bodies, we are all sharing it. But the turnover of committees is so quick that it's difficult to keep up. Hence why I want to die with no secrets. I want to share everything so that the more people who are speaking like this and understanding that this is something that we can all influence, then we're starting to have more of an impact on those people who aren't letting go for their reasons. It might be one of those, or it might be a million others, or their interpretation of those. And you ask them, and they'll say, no, of course I've only got the best interests of the club at heart. Really? Really?
But we've had discussions. Something just came to mind when you talked about that divergent perspective, or those divergent perspectives within the same club. We are,
by the way, Steve's doing kind of 6, 7 actions in the same.
We're very gesticulatory. We get it from our mother. So those clubs that have got people in them who really strongly associate that club with being a social club, and others in the same club who really strongly associate that club with being an elite competitive organisation. We've even had sessions in which, strategic planning sessions in which committee members have identified that they are so clearly on a path contradictory to the rest of the committee that they've said, this isn't the right committee for me to be on. Because we're just going to be pulling, in opposite
this isn't
directions.
The right club for me and my kids to be playing at.
And in some cases, even that extreme, that's right, because we thought that this club was all about this, and until we actually forced that discussion to happen, it's never taken place. Just quickly to go back to the question that I asked you and the responses that you provided, I agree with all of that, and I think that there's also...
What did I miss though? What did you?
The one thing that I think was top of mind for me, in addition to at least a couple of those things that were playing on my mind as well, a couple of things that you said, is the passion with which people stick up their hand to take on a role, and their perception of what that role is before they are elected. So recognising that many of our elections are uncontested, and it's the last person to...
Or, I'll put your hand
that's
up
right,
for
yeah,
you.
okay. Husband or wife or friend or... Yes. But for me, the lack of pre-boarding, the notion of actually educating someone what this role is all about before they are even elected to that. And this was a discussion that came up recently when someone said, oh, well, you've got to make sure you only do the induction after the elections so that people don't run scared. And I said, well, funny you say that, because one of our clients actually gets us in to run a session for all the candidates. And I know that we've done this quite significantly in the university
And some
sector.
of them do run.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
They shouldn't be there.
That's right. So I think that there's also a lack of understanding amongst many committee members that is no fault of their own, because they were maybe had their hand put up by someone else, or they maybe were appeased into the role. This is great. It's a great opportunity for connection.
And I'll be there right beside you the whole year.
That old chestnut. That's right. Yeah. So I think that's a big shortcoming as well, is a lack of clarity that is provided to our newcomers to a leadership position regarding how things should be done. And again, that's associated with the way that things have always been done, being, systematically aligned with the size that the club used to be, and no one ever having come along and said, whoa, we're a really different club now than we were 5, 10, 50 years ago, and we need to behave like it.
And it's because we don't go from 150 to 700 in one go. It's just a trickle.
Yep.
It's a few more, it's a few more, it's a few more. But it's amazing that it's at that crossing and recognising the variance of the perception of what that number actually is. It's somewhere between 145 and 165. Like that's where we start to see the cracks emerge And sometimes those cracks mean, splinter club of 30 members now competing with the 140 member strong club back here. Like,
and both of whom now have,
president,
decimated
vice
resources.
president, secretary, treasurer, annual return fees, audit fees, lease fees.
Less
maintenance.
resources, more stuff to do.
Yeah, and the compliance doubles.
Yep.
So in all of this, it's really important to reiterate that our volunteers are the victims. So, and we've kind of picked on a few of them who haven't known the right time to step back or who haven't taken the time to look up. But how are they equipped to do that? We've got state government departments of sport. We've got the Australian Sports Commission that is dealing with NSOs, national sporting organisations, and trying to win gold medals. That's fine. And we've got state associations trying to run competitions and trying to provide a strong, solid foundation so that the sport will still be here in generations to come. And then we've got clubs that aren't necessary, and the volunteers come and go very quickly, sometimes a year or less if they don't last a whole term of only a year and just want to hand it on. So we need our state association, the state associations and the national bodies I think are doing fine. I think that the Sports Commission needs to acknowledge that there's commentary. It's not necessarily information or more training programs. We've got enough access to training programs, and particularly because our training programs deal with the people, not the organisation. The AS is kind of pushing, here, just do another self-assessment and we'll see where you're at and we'll see your fun. And whatever. We've got to move beyond that and say we identify that the challenge here is being borne by people who haven't been given the skills or even the knowledge that this is going to be different. And when you're ready as a volunteer, as an organisation, remember the saying, it's only when the student is ready that the master will appear. You've got to be ready. And if this does nothing else, if this little rant does nothing else but get more clubs and more mums and dads who are the reluctant volunteers left carrying the baby when no one else wants the job, if they're ready to say, tell me more about that, we've achieved what I set out to achieve in this episode. That's all that we need to happen. It's the desire to learn and the knowledge that there's something else. Great, give it to me. What do I need to know? And you remember Graham, our accountant years ago. Every year he used to teach me something, and it was fascinating. And I can probably say this safely enough, some very clever and legal way of minimising my tax position. And I'd go, Graham, why didn't you tell me that last year?
Because you didn't ask.
No, a better answer, Michael, last year you didn't need to know. He said, if you knew everything I knew, your head would explode. that kind of accountant. Great accountant. He knew that I didn't need to know that. So he gave me what I needed to run my business at that stage. When the time, now you need this. So I had a confidant, a mentor, a trusted advisor that was guiding me on that journey of growth that we try and provide for our clubs. And that's exactly what we do for the clubs that we work directly with, but it's also what we try and do through the podcast to share that. So we want to better support our volunteers. And this is all part of this mini-series package that says we expect so much more of our clubs. Government expects more. The public expects more. Our volunteers aren't tooled or skilled to do that. We can fix it. We are fixing it. The purpose of the episodes like this is to get better leverage, to say if we have more people speaking the same language and understanding this, then more people can help solve the problem, rather than just whinge, bitch and moan and go on a current affair and say, nobody's supporting it, clubs are folding because council's doing it. As usual, Steve, it has been wonderful to rant in the same general vicinity as you, this time in person rather than just
Rant
on the
with,
screen.
rant at, rant to.
Rant next to.
Yep.
Yes.
Good. Thank you. It's been my pleasure to have you rant to me.
Next
As
to
always,
me.
to passage on this rant of Basket Casey goodness.
Thanks, of course, to Jess, our wonderful producer and editor, for putting all of these podcasts together. If you're not already following us on social media, make sure you do so. At NFP Michael and CPR Group Oz is where you'll find us. And there's daily tidbits, so little chunks of information that just once a day spend, a minute, less than a minute, learning something that you can apply that day to make your job as a community volunteer even better. Until next time, stay unbasket casey, stay showcasey.
Stay on your Segway.
As in, don't fall off your Segway. Or is that about staying? Well, did we start? Was this an episode about a Segway and then we just went on a big Segway?
Yeah.
It's not going to get any better. Thanks, Steve.
See ya.
See ya.
Basket Case Clubs acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country on which we record, being Yugambeh, Turrbal, Jagera and Kabi Kabi land. We recognise their enduring connection to land, waters and culture, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to First Nations listeners.